Picture this, a single day, way back in 1757, and the world changes forever. This is the incredible story of how a private company, a corporation with its own army, managed to overthrow a whole kingdom. And they did it in a battle they had absolutely no business winning. We're talking about the Battle of Plassey. Okay, let's set the scene. We're on a battlefield in Bengal, India. It's June 1757. And honestly, on paper, this looks like a complete and utter massacre waiting to happen. You've heard of David versus Goliath, right? Well, this is that on steroids. The odds here are, well, they're even more insane than you can probably imagine. Just take a look at these numbers. Seriously, on one side, you've got the British East India Company, and remember, this is a private company, not a country, with maybe 3,000 soldiers. And on the other side, the ruler of Bengal, the Nawab, with a massive army of around 50,000. 50,000, plus war elephants and some seriously powerful cannons. So you can see the contrast right here. On one side, you've got this professional European-style soldier from the company, disciplined, drilled. And then, on the other side, just the sheer scale of the Nawab's forces. We're talking about artillery platforms so huge they needed oxen to pull them and elephants to push them. I mean, this wasn't just an army, it was a whole spectacle, a show of overwhelming force. Which, of course, brings us to the big question, the one we're all thinking. How on earth did this tiny force pull this off? How did they defeat an army more than 15 times their size? Well, the answer isn't just about good soldiers or better guns. Oh no. It's a story of greed, of betrayal, and a secret plot that was brewing for months before a single shot was ever fired. Okay, so to really get how this happened, we gotta rewind a bit and look at the why. You see, back in the mid-1700s, Bengal was an economic powerhouse. I mean, it was a global hub for manufacturing, one of the richest places on the planet. And you guessed it, all these European companies were falling over themselves to get a piece of that pie. Now, this is a really key point. The British East India Company was not the British government. Think of it like a massive multinational corporation today, but with its own private army. Yeah, a company with an army. And they weren't the only ones playing this game. Their biggest rival, the French East India Company, was right there with them, fighting for control and influence all across India. So who was in charge of this incredibly wealthy kingdom? That would be the Nawab, Siraj-ud-Dowlah. He was young, only 23 years old, and pretty new to the throne. People said he had let's say, a ferocious temper. And he was really suspicious of these European companies that were making a fortune in his territory and, acting like they ran the place. And that simmering tension, it finally boils over. The breaking point comes when the Nawab sees the British building up their fort in Calcutta, and they didn't even ask his permission. So he tells them, hey, stop that. And the British? They just refuse. For Siraj-ud-Dowlah, this was a massive insult, a direct challenge to his rule in his own kingdom. Okay, so the Nawab's response is exactly what you'd expect. It's swift and it's brutal. But the company's countermove, well, it isn't just about sending in more soldiers. It's something much darker, way more cunning. And believe me, this is where the battle was really won, long before anyone stepped onto the field. So the Nawab marches that giant army of his right up to the British headquarters in Calcutta and just takes it. It's almost easy. So, from his point of view, problem solved, right? Case closed. But for the East India Company? Oh no. This was a huge blow, not just to their pride, but more importantly, to their bottom line, their profits. Enter the man the company sends to fix this mess, Colonel Robert Clive. This guy is ambitious, he's ruthless, and he's an absolutely brilliant strategist. He takes one look at the numbers, his 3,000 against their 50,000, and knows a straight-up fight would be suicide. So he decides he's not going to win this war on the battlefield. He's going to win it with a conspiracy. So Clive and his people start looking for allies in the one place the Nawab would never expect, his own court. They find powerful guys who are not big fans of their new young ruler. The biggest fish is Mir Jafar, the army's commander-in-chief, who felt like he'd been pushed aside. Then there's Raid Durlub, another top general, and the Joggetsets, basically the richest bankers in all of India, who were worried Siraj was going to come after their money. Clive makes them all a very simple, very tempting offer. Help us get rid of your boss, and we'll make you the new guy in charge. But just as the plan is all coming together, it hits a major snag, a wrench in the works. A merchant named Omi Chand finds out about the whole secret plot. and he decides he wants a piece of the action. His price for staying quiet? An absolutely staggering amount of money. If he doesn't get paid, he's going straight to the Nawab, and the entire conspiracy goes up in smoke. So what does Clive do? Does he pay the blackmail? Nope. He decides to fight fire with fire. He counters blackmail with some truly next-level deception. They draft up 2 different treaties. One, the real one, on white paper, which has no mention of Omicron's payout, and then a second, fake one, on red paper that promises Omicron every penny he asked for. They even forge a top admiral's signature on the fake one. They show the fake treaty to Omicron, he thinks he's hit the jackpot, and he keeps his mouth shut. Just like that, the conspiracy is back on. And get this, years later, when the British Parliament called him in to explain this, the forgery and the blatant deception, Clive was completely unapologetic. This quote here gives you a perfect window into how his mind worked. He said, "It was a matter of true policy and of justice to deceive so great a villain. For him, the ends totally justified the means. No question about it." So, the secret plot is safe. The trap is set. And with that, Clive marches his tiny army to meet the Nawab's massive force at a place called Plassey. You have to understand, he wasn't just betting on his soldiers' skills. He was betting everything on the treachery he had so carefully arranged. And the battle itself, it was actually surprisingly short. It all kicks off around 8 a.m. with this huge but pretty ineffective cannon fire from the Nawab side. But then, 2 key things happen that just change everything. First, a sudden torrential rainstorm. And second, the death of the one general the Nawab could actually, truly trust. By late afternoon, the whole thing is over. That rainstorm I mentioned, it turned out to be absolutely critical. And it all came down to one simple thing: gunpowder. The British troops, disciplined as they were, immediately covered their gunpowder with tarps to keep it dry. The Nawab's army? They didn't. So when the rain stopped, the British could still fire their cannons. But most of the Nawab's cannons were useless. Their powder was completely soaked. And then, right as the rain is letting up, bam! Mir Jafar, the Nawab's most loyal and best commander, is killed by a stray British cannonball. Siraj-ud-Dawla is just devastated. His best general is gone, his cannons are wet, his army is a mess. And that's when his other commanders, remember, the ones in on the plot, come to him and say, "It's over, you have to retreat." And tragically, he listens to them. And here it is, the final nail in the coffin, the absolute checkmate moment. That massive army of 50,000 soldiers, it was never really a 50,000-man army. Why? Because huge chunks of it, the parts commanded by the traitors, Mir Jafar and Rai Durlab, they just stood there. They did nothing. They never even joined the fight. The Nawab's army wasn't defeated. It literally fell apart from the inside out. So the battle was over in just a few hours, a blip in time. But the consequences, the fallout from this one day would go on to reshape not just India, but the entire world for the next 200 years. Right after the battle, Clive keeps his end of the bargain. He meets with the traitor, Mir Jafar, and officially salutes him as the new Nawab of Bengal. So Mir Jafar gets what he wanted. He gets the throne. But it's an empty prize. He's now just a puppet, and the company is pulling all the strings. He's completely dependent on them to stay in power. You really can't overstate how much this one victory changed everything. Before the Battle of Plassey, the East India Company was just a group of traders. After Plassey, they were rulers. They were a government. They took control of Bengal's immense wealth, used it to fund an even bigger army, kicked their French rivals out for good, and started a century of conquest that would eventually create the British Empire in India. So when you boil it all down, you're left with this one critical realization. The Battle of Plassey wasn't really one country conquering another. It was a hostile corporate takeover, plain and simple. It was executed with guns, with lies, and with bribery, all for the profit of shareholders thousands of miles away. And it leaves us with a pretty chilling question, one that's just as relevant today as it was back in 1757. What happens when a corporation gets powerful enough to command an army?